All right, everybody, welcome to First Attack. I'm James Chen. I'm glad you could join us. This is the First Attack episode in a while. We've definitely not been having as many First Attack and Level 3 focus this year, but we are back on track, and we are going to do some Street Fighter teaching, some fighting game teaching here. Please, everybody, if there are any technical difficulties, as there normally has been, please let me know. But otherwise, if everything is running smooth, then I shall go ahead and proceed with today's First Attack. So for those of you guys who are just tuning in, maybe learned about UltraChenTV from Evo or such, and haven't seen any First Attack episodes before, what First Attack, we basically run two shows here on UltraChenTV on Monday. We run First Attack, and then we run Level 3 Focus. Level 3 Focus concentrates more on high-level tactics, shows very, very detailed analysis of matches and such. And First Attack is a show geared towards beginners, towards people who don't know much about fighting games. And I'm basically here to teach you very, very low-level stuff. Basically, trying to help you guys get into fighting games, because fighting games are very difficult to learn. They are very difficult to understand. So if you guys can, check out UltraChenTV.com. There's an episode list there with a bunch of... Click on the First Attack show link that's on the menu bar, and you can see a lot of different shows about different concepts here and there. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is, I guess what I'm going to call it here is the fighting game strategy ladder. So basically what I'm going to try to talk about is how strategy categories stack up on top of each other. So you're going to find at the bottom of the ladder is going to be the most basic strategies, which is what most people will be accustomed to using when they first start playing fighting games. And these are the strategies that will not get you quite as far. And we'll work our way up the ladder to the point where the very top is the important things, the things that are going to propel you into being a tournament level performer, being a top level player. Now, the one thing I want to really get across before we start, and excuse me, my voice is still mostly dead from Evo, because Evo was extremely hype, and we will be doing an Evo wrap-up show tomorrow. But I want people to understand that climbing this ladder is not simple. Just because I'm going to lay out these different layers of and kinds of strategies to use, and I'm going to try to quantify them as best as possible, qualify them as best as possible, doesn't mean that it's going to be like, oh, well, then I should be able to jump up the ladder pretty easily. Still takes a lot of work, and you're going to run into a lot of walls here. I mean, I've had very similar shows where I talked about the level of players. So, like, you're a beginning player, you're a tournament level player, you're a casual player and stuff. But now, instead of actually qualifying the players, I'm going to qualifying the kinds of strategies that people use when they play fighting games. So again, this is new rig. I haven't done the PowerPoint slides on the PC yet, but if you... Ooh, look at this. It's the screen capture. There we go. There you go. For a second there, we had like some crazy Inception thing going on here. But here we go. This is actually going to be the slideshows here. What I'm going to do is lay out the levels of strategy from the most basic to the highest level of strategy. Again, it's going to take a little bit to get accustomed to growing between them, but I'm going to go through these. I'm going to take my time on these a little bit and try to show examples. I'm going to be swapping between Marvel and Street Fighter, mostly on Street Fighter, so, you know, pardon me when I switch games back and forth between them and such like that. So here we go. The layers of fighting game strategy. So what do I mean by fighting game strategy? Before I even get into this, what do I mean? You hear a lot of times, especially on commentary and when you read in articles and you talk to about a bunch of different things, you hear a lot of common terms. You hear about shenanigans. That's a common thing that you'll always hear about. You hear about things like character knowledge, matchup knowledge. You hear things about fundamentals. And these are all just kind of almost, they feel like buzzwords. Like, what exactly do these mean? And how do they relate to each other? And how important is one over the other and such? And so what I'm going to try to do here is actually rank them in importance. Talk to you exactly what it is and how to approach them and how you can use each layer to continue to build on to each other until you reach the highest level. A lot of people talk about something like fundamentals, and ironically, fundamentals, while it sounds like it should be the basics, is really the hardest thing to learn in fighting games, as it turns out. So that's actually at the top of the ladder. So starting at the bottom of the ladder, here we go. We have one-player games. This is exactly what I'm just going to, at the most basic level of fighting game strategy, we have one-player games, right? And I'm just going to go through each rung in the ladder, and then I'll go into what each of these means exactly. So at the very bottom, when you first start playing any fighting game, you're playing one-player games, right? From that point forward, when you advance past one-player games, you start developing patterns. You start finding things that work, and you start adhering to certain specific sequences. Again, this is very common, but I'll get into details in a little bit. After patterns, this is where shenanigans come in. And shenanigans is a tough one to qualify, because shenanigans can be good and they can be bad. But again, shenanigans are still at a fairly low level of fighting game strategy. The next level is what I'm going to call character knowledge. This is how well you know the character that you're playing, right? And this is only about the character that you're playing. The next level, the next rung above that, and sorry, this, of course, these bullets are going down, but we're thinking about climbing a ladder. I probably should have did it the other way now that I think about it, but oh well. Is matchup knowledge. Matchup knowledge is the next level of strategy that you're going to start developing after character knowledge. From there comes game knowledge. This is specific. This is for game specialists, and this is for players who are really, really delving deep into a particular game. They really understand the game. And finally, after game knowledge, is fundamentals. This is, and you know, again, I've mentioned this, it sounds weird because fundamentals sounds like it's the basic, right? Like if you want to learn the fundamentals of something, that usually means the basics. But here in this case, for fighting games, it is not the basics. It actually turns out to be the highest level of fighting game play. And in that case, it's kind of a misnomer. And it's kind of frustrating in that way, because when people talk about, oh, he doesn't know his fundamentals in fighting games, you start feeling bad because you're like, well, I don't know my fundamentals, and it sounds like it's the basics. No, fundamentals is actually, the way I'm going to describe it, is stuff that applies to all fighting games. It's just general knowledge, and you know what? One other thing about fundamentals is they even expand past fighting games as well. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as soon as I get to that slide. But what I'm going to do now is go through each one of these slides one by one and explain to you exactly what I mean by these categories. And it's going to be interesting. I hope all you guys watching will be able to see this and maybe start relating. And maybe even for some of you guys who are already at the higher levels of strategy, you can see the lower levels in strategy and go, oh yeah, I remember when I was there. Or more importantly, a lot of people are going to see these and go, I'm there right now. How do I get above? So the how part, it's going to be hard to explain. I'm not going to delve into it, but what I'm going to do is just talk about the different levels so you can kind of get a grasp of where you are in terms of while you are playing the game and what types of strategies you are utilizing. So if we go into the first slide here, we're going to talk about one-player games. What am I talking about? One-player games? This is how all of us start playing fighting games, okay? I've often brought up the analogy of Street Fighter and or all fighting games to being part of a dance. You have a partner in your dance and you have to pay attention to them. You're guiding them, they are guiding you. Your position is based on their position. Your actions are based on their actions and vice versa. Having a partner in a dance is a very important thing, and in order to have a good dance, you got to pay attention to them. Well, one-player games is you're just not even paying attention to them. You barely know they exist. You're completely ignoring your partner, and you're just doing whatever you want. Your partner's trying to do a waltz, and you're just kind of going crazy and doing some sort of like mosh pit dancing or something like that, right? This comes from a couple of different places. This ignoring your partner comes largely from playing against the computer a little bit too much, because you just start playing things and you start recognizing what they do. So you're not really worried about what they do. You're just doing your thing. You're just trying stuff, right? You're just trying to land a combo. I learned this cool Marvel combo. I'm going to try to hit the computer with it. And so you don't care what the computer's doing. You're just trying to land your combo. This also comes from being too much of a training mode monster. And this one I can actually say from experience, because for a lot of you guys out there who are familiar with me and my history, recent history of fighting games, I've been trying to get good at Marvel for a very long time. And I'm terrible at the game. I'm terrible at the game, but that's because I am a training mode monster in this game. I play one-player games when I play Marvel. In fact, so when I'm playing Marvel, I'm at the bottom rung. And this is why I'm so terrible at the game. This is something I realized the last time I was playing with Olaf and his group of friends, Olaf Redland. Shoutouts to Mike, aka Olaf. Shoutouts to all those guys. But it's dangerous if you only play training mode and develop strategies in training mode. So what does this mean? What does one-player games mean? It just basically amounts to you're just trying things. You don't care what your opponent is doing. You've developed something and you're just going to try it. You're not paying attention. You're only focused on your character, on your side of the screen, and your meters and your life, and you don't care what the opponent is doing. And this is a huge problem because it's not going to get you very far in actual play. Let's see if I can get this to work here. Can you hear? Alright, so I've put up Marvel on purpose because this is where I am. I am a training mode monster here. I have so many neat little tricks here with Felicia and all of my assists, like Doom assist here, right? So for example, one thing that I figured out what I was doing in training mode is if I call Doom and I roll into rolling buckler, which hits low like this, I can catch people low. The problem with it is that it has delay. So if my opponent blocks this, they can punish me. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to call Doom, roll, and rolling buckler, and oh, look at this. Because I called Doom, I can do this safely, and I can get a combo off of it. This is awesome. This is rad. And you know what? If they block it, the beam will save me. This is such a beautiful strategy. This is awesome. So I can do this, and if I hit him, then I can go into some crazy combo. You know what, let me... Oh yeah, look at me. I'm so good at Marvel. I can do crazy combos, and I have this really wonderful sequence here, etc., etc. This is really, really cool, right? I'm super happy about this. So what happens is, when I go into actual gameplay, and I actually try to utilize this strategy in an actual tournament, I discover very, very quickly that my opponent is never on the ground. They're never standing there to get caught by this trick. Most of the time when you play Marvel, the opponent's in the air. They're flying everywhere, all over the place. Magneto is tri-jumping. Doom is flying up there shooting finger lasers at you and stuff like this. But here I am, and because I developed this tactic in training mode, all I'm trying to do is rolling buckler and call Doom because it was a good strategy, something that I figured out in training mode, one-player games. I'm not paying attention to my opponent. I don't know what character he's using. I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to do that. Another good example is Doom jumping up in the air and throwing finger lasers, not paying attention that my opponent has Strider as an assist, Vajra assist. So I jump up there, throw finger lasers, they call Vajra, and I get bodied. Right? That's a huge problem. This is called one-player strategy. Basically, you've developed something that in your mind you think it works, and you just try things. And even the examples that I'm giving right now with this Felicia rolling buckler stuff is very high level, because I'm like, oh, if I hit, I can confirm. If they block, whatever. There's even much more basic levels of one-player games. So let me see if I can show you the most basic of one-player games here. That is going to be the Ken flowchart. Probably the most infamous form of one-player game. If you guys haven't heard of the Ken flowchart, it's this wonderful thing that came out during vanilla. Basically saying that you just mash DPs all day. That's all you do, is just mash uppercuts all over the place, right? So here's Ken. You throw fireballs, and if they jump, uppercut them. And anytime they come close, uppercut them. You know, just mash uppercuts and such like that. This is Street Fighter version of one-player game. And it's very, very, very dangerous to have. So basically all you're doing is, you know that when the opponent gets close, this close, just mash an uppercut out. Just try to uppercut and hopefully you'll hit them. And if they're about this close right here and your uppercut's going to miss, you jump backwards to throw a fireball. And then if they jump at you when you throw a fireball, you uppercut. If they don't jump, you throw a fireball again. This is the Ken flowchart, essentially, right? And this is the problem. See, what you're actually doing here is you're just playing Ken. I don't even know who my opponent is. I just know when somehow I feel like I'm scared and I'm in trouble, I'm just going to uppercut. Or if I'm far away and I feel safe, I'm going to throw a fireball. This is basically the entire crux of your entire strategy. When you're in this middle range, you're just confused, so you just try to jump away so you can get to this safe range and throw fireballs. Or they end up really close, and so you mash out uppercuts. There's nothing to this game plan. The whole thing is completely based on what you feel, and you're not paying attention to your opponent. Again, you're not dancing with the opponent. There's just this one strategy you developed, and you're just fixated on it. This is one-player game. This is where we all start. And yeah, actually, Sojax, I think that's actually a really good point to mention, is that sometimes these flowcharts will work online. And that's actually kind of frustrating. Not necessarily to the player using the flowchart. Well, actually, it is not to the person that's getting beat by the flowchart, but the person who's doing the flowchart. It's frustrating because they don't know that they're hurting themselves. And all of us are going to start this way. And the problem is, you will win games using some of these flowcharts, especially with a character like Ken. Or even like in Vanilla's Street Fighter 4, Zangief's just mashed lariats all day, and that worked because Lariat was super buff. So the problem is that you have to, and again, just because I point out these rungs doesn't mean you're going to be able to jump across the rungs. You're going to start off as this one-player game, and you're not going to realize that it's bad for you because you're going to win 1 out of every 5 games. So you feel like you're doing something right, or win 1 out of every 10 games, 8 games. I pulled that 5 out of nowhere. Okay, so you're going to win occasional games. And unfortunately, that validates what you're doing, so you're not going to grow any further beyond that. But what you have to realize is that by playing one-player games, you're not playing fighting games. Fighting games are inherently a 2-player game. If you guys managed to watch Evo, I said this on stream during Fudo versus Snake Eyes, how Fudo was very careful about keeping one specific distance from Snake Eyes. So every time Snake Eyes walked forward, Fudo would back off, and then every time Snake Eyes backed off, Fudo would walk forward. It wasn't even about staying out of Zangief's range. He was literally maintaining a fixed distance X from Snake Eyes, so that anytime Snake Eyes jumped, he would be in range for for Fei Long's flame kick or standing roundhouse. And that is very much a dance. That is Fudo playing purely based off of what Snake Eyes is doing. He's not concentrating he's not thinking about his own things. He's not like, oh, I really want to get in and hit him with stand fierce. It would be really cool if I could catch him with the overhead. None of that. He was literally playing a fixed distance. So at the lowest level of fighting games, you're playing a one-player game, not thinking about your opponent. You're like, I want to land this combo. I want to land this trick. I really feel like throwing him. This is one-player game. You have to understand that the reason you choose to do all these things, there has to be one. There has to be a reason for you to do a lot of these things. So that's the one-player game. So you need to evolve past one-player games. The next layer, hang on a second. The next layer, the next rung that we're going to jump into is patterns. The tricky thing about patterns is that patterns make you feel like you're not playing a one-player game, but you still are playing a one-player game. And the reason for that is because patterns are stuff that you pick up on that seem to work, but you don't understand the logic and the psychology behind it. You don't understand why this necessarily works, right? One of the most famous patterns that I've ever seen was in Third Strike, or any of the Street Fighter 3 games. So in that game, in the Street Fighter 3 series, everyone had universal overheads. UOHs is what they termed them. And basically, you could do 2 universal overheads into sweep. That is a pattern. That is a sequence. You do a universal overhead, most people are blocking, you hit them. You do another universal overhead, you hit them again. So then they're like, oh, I've learned now, I need to high block. So then you do a sweep, they stand up because they're looking for another universal overhead, you catch them with the sweep. This is a great pattern, and it works a lot of the times, but it's just a pattern. Before you even done anything, you've already determined, I'm going to do 2 universal overheads into a sweep. So again, you're not playing a 2-player game. You've already decided this is exactly what you're going to do. So it's not going to help you at all. You don't understand the psychology behind, is the opponent scared? Is he confident? Is he the kind of person that will learn and such? And in that case, sometimes you may do 3 in a row. Sometimes you may do 1 universal overhead in a row. These are patterns. And here, let me give you guys another example of patterns here. Another example of a pattern for Ken, for example. Oh, actually, let me give you a better example of a pattern here. Because I'm a Kami player, right? So a lot of things that I do, I can easily think of examples from Kami, because this is just, she's the character that I've used the most. One of the things that a lot of people have noticed is that after a dive kick from really high up, people try to throw, you get tech throws, or they try to low short you and stuff like that. So what a lot of basic Kami players are going to do online is they're going to jump up, dive kick, and then immediately uppercut when they land, right? Because uppercut beats everything. So what a lot of people are going to do when they're Kami, jump up here, uppercut, maybe FADC backdash if you've learned how to FADC and such like that. But this is another pattern. Like, you can think to yourself, I really need to win. I really need to win. My opponent has half his life and I'm down to a chunk. So what I want to do here is I want to do uppercut, FADC, backdash into Ultra 1. So I'm going to come up to him, jump, dive kick, uppercut, and hopefully hit him with my pattern, basically, right? This is something you've determined ahead of time. This is something that you've wanted to do already. You've already picked it out before anything happened. And the biggest problem with that then is that a lot of times when the opponent blocks or gets hit by the dive kick and such, their mindset's going to be different depending on the situation. And in fact, some players who are really smart are going to see, hey, look at that. I have half my life. He has 2 meters to be able to uppercut FADC me. Oh, I blocked a dive kick really high up. Of course he's going to uppercut because he's really desperate to make a comeback. And so you uppercut, FADC, you burn your meters, or he backdashes and makes you whiff your uppercut. Or he uses his own uppercut to beat your uppercut, etc., etc. Again, you're just picking something that you want to do and you're going with it right away. And that's a problem. And that's definitely a problem. And so what happens is you start taking these sequences as gospel. And the hardest part about them is the reason why you know them, you know this sequence, is because it's worked. And it's probably worked a lot. So when I talked about in the previous slide about one-player games, about doing stuff, you're going to win a few games, like with the Ken flowchart stuff or whatever like that. You're going to win occasionally. However, these kind of sequences that are based on real strategies, that have a real foundation in strategy, will get you wins occasionally. But because they get you wins, you just think they work. You just think that this is a sequence. This is a trick, basically. And you start relying on these tricks. This is exactly how I played fighting games back in the hyper fighting days, probably up through about Super Turbo. When I was learning Street Fighter, it was about tricks. Oh, this trick beats an uppercut. This trick beats this anti-air. This counters this. And so I just amassed this giant library of tricks. And I just kept saying, I'm going to try this trick now. I'm going to try this trick now. I'm going to try this trick now. And whenever my opponent was smarter than me and hit me with something that I didn't realize was a thing, I would be like, oh, he hit me with a new trick that I haven't seen before. So now I'm going to put this trick into my library of tricks and be aware of it next time. It's not how it works. It's not how it works at the highest level of play. Tricks aren't like... There is a psychology basis behind the tricks, and people can adjust them on the fly. The top level players will adjust them on the fly. So you'll use them as tricks and kind of rely on them, and that's not going to get you very far. Because the biggest problem with that is that you lack improvisation. And fighting games is all about improvisation. Fighting games is all about improvisation. Reading your opponent, reading the situation, looking at life, looking at meter, looking at distance. It's all about improvisation. And the over-reliance on tricks and patterns and sequences, all meaning the same thing here, is that you will lose your improvisation, so that once none of your tricks start working, you're left with nothing. You've got nothing left. You've got nothing. You're just sitting there and you're just like, I don't know what to do anymore. He's beaten all my tricks. And now you're basically defeated. And this is why a lot of top players will have a hard time fighting against good, average players for the first round or two, and then all of a sudden just destroy them in the second game. Because in the first game, you're using all your tricks. And like I said, tricks work. Sequences work. These kind of things work. And they will work on even the best players. But as soon as you used it, you've showed your card. And so now the opponent's not going to fall for these tricks anymore. And once they start countering all your tricks, you've got nothing left. And in the last game, you're basically playing scared. And you're running away. And you don't know what to do. Because you have nothing but tricks in your book. And so now your opponent just demolishes you. And it's why when I personally do commentary, I point this out all the time. Whenever top players get beat in the first game, they always look human, and everyone's like, hey, maybe this challenger is really good. But honestly, you don't know anything until the second or third game. That will tell you exactly where the skill level disparity comes from. So, okay. So before we get into the next rung, I'm going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about... One last thing I want to say about patterns. Can help you in low-level matches, but you will get beat up by high-level players. High-level players. So, don't rely on patterns too much. So, everyone's going to start there. And it's good. It's good because now you understand that there's this concept of tricks and patterns. But what you want to start being able to do is understand how to come up with tricks on the fly. And that's the key to Street Fighter right there. Alright guys, I will be right back. Stick around and we will get into the next rung, which is Shenanigans. Be right back.